So how does Shiftkey elevate its workflow with Condens, our research impact workflow? And we might ask, where should we begin? We actually want to start this story about 6 months before our first invoice from Condens. So January 2023, I was brought on board. I was very fortunate to join a team of wonderful designers who were transitioning truly from that startup feel to a much larger SMB setting where we were growing our maturity. There was no research operations at the time, but the people had different levels of experience in terms of how to operate. If we want to have some kind of goalpost setting, we could say that we were, moving towards a 3 on the Nielsen-Norman scale of UX maturity. So, it was becoming emergent. It wasn't quite systematized, but it was certainly in product. The UX team, thanks to many stakeholders, now our VP, many others, were able to build those relationships and get it acknowledged. However, it wasn't pervasive, and UX research was not even really thought of at the time. So there was a big task ahead of us, which I was excited to begin. But we realized that we needed a repository, right? You need somewhere to centralize your findings such that others know how to act upon them and be informed. In order to do this, we needed to first build a practice internally of what is the right kind of rigor, what's the right kind of integrity in terms of getting the right type of evidence in, and how do we create literacy around this? So right when I was getting in, trying to start this emergent process of UX research, our product design and engineering teams were also being transformed with the continuous discovery habits playbook by Teresa Torres. Some of you may have seen this. It's one of those mini dual track agile formats. And it's worked really well for our organization. I had the fun surprise of being the facilitator for over 100 folks for about 6 weeks. Forgive the Gaussian blur. We do have IP throughout this presentation that we cannot show, but for illustration, you may see 6 columns here on a Miro board. And these were 6 weeks of an hour and a half each day where I got to wake up and start my day very early and speak to everyone and teach how we were going to operate in this model. Essentially, the important thing is this model is continuous discovery. If you've not heard of it before, it's a good book. You be able to talk about how not just designers or design researchers, but engineer leaders as well as product managers go about and collect evidence by directly speaking to users. So it really creates this team effort. We've expanded it in our organization to also include our data team. Excuse me. And that helps with the prioritization. So it's not a typical list order prioritization roadmap. Instead, what happens is you create an opportunity solution tree, big word. All that means is it allows you as a team to have agency in saying, we believe there's an opportunity we can pursue. And in that opportunity to have, of course, business outcome, we're going to fortify it with evidence for our claim of why we believe this will bring about a good business impact. It's been very healthy. Now, what we see here currently on the screen was where we were probably about 3 months into January or to 2023. So we had these static Google slides that look very nice, but they were static. And this is how we were capturing the evidence and insights that was a byproduct of the teams getting up and running and speaking to our users. Low level of getting in, right? Everyone is familiar with the Google Slides application. You just go in, you edit this thing. The problem is that you would do this and then you drop that and perhaps some recordings in a Google Drive. And I'm sure this is no surprise to others, love Google products, but Google Drive is where research goes to die because no one's going to access that again. No one's going to go back in there. So it was a goodwill effort. And this is where we started, but we knew we needed something that was more dynamic, more searchable, something that was also an easy entry point. Could not be Google Slides forever. So while that was happening and discussions were happening internally to figure out this problem, we did have an intermediary Notion-based repository where we had things like temperatures that I created for teams, trying to instill best practices, and so that we have a unified rigor across all teams and how we do create this evidence that we then take decisions and we're informed, not necessarily data driven, but data informed decisions that we take responsibility for. In that, we also had our fantastic marketing partners. So all this was coalescing at the same time, right? So we have this maturity going up. We have people that are now in these squads that are going out and talking to our users, as well as new personas that we're trying to acquire. We have ways of documenting it that's not perfect. And now we have our marketing partners really elevating our game. So it's no longer just us sending out emails to people saying, hey, on a one-off, would you mind taking some time to speak with us? We'd have some compensation. You're really valuable. Instead, our marketing partners were able to identify the segmentation with our data team, send out mass emails, start to have that wave after wave. Our goal was such that our teams would be speaking to at least one or two people every week. I'm happy to say since then that has escalated much more. But at the time, that was a big hump. That's an inflection point that any team needs to get over. So where have we gone so far in the past 6 months of this conversation starting? I laid out Reopt's full strategy behind the scenes with my design leadership team, um, helped teach the CDH, the Continuous Discovery Habits Playbook, across the engineering product design departments over 6 weeks, created that static repo and resource hub for people to have temperatures and best practices. We started to have coaching and people creating and performing generative interviews, lots of problem identification, early part of the research process, which was fantastic, as well as pairing with some unmoderated user testing at the end, getting up our skills there before we get into moderated work. And as I mentioned, our marketing partners had that automated recruitment process. So we were feeling really good around June, July last year. The machine's running, but does it really matter if none of those insights that you're creating are persuasive and pervasive, which is the topic of our talk today? As you can see here in the subtext, it doesn't matter. If you're creating insights, then you're wasting the organization's money if it's not being acted upon. I think that is the fear that people have deep down. And that's ultimately the most important thing, right? We need to be able to see this evidence as something that's creating revenue, helping us take the right decisions. So what have we done so that Condens was accepted and adopted by the team as the go-to place for research? And what was that impact for us? Let's start out with the persuasive element. So at the earliest area, once we had Condens going into play, we needed a way to start to slowly share out and get people's feet wet across the organization who may not be familiar with UX research. So we made this every other week meeting that we still persist today called a meet and greet, which is a clever little title of saying, hey, let our people who are performing user research share out these individuals are speaking with. One of the critical things that led to success here is that we do not allow solutioning on the call, meaning we don't allow certain stakeholders to say, oh, that's a great thing. How about you try this? Do this thing. Because we want our teams to maintain their autonomy and agency and to be able to have the courage to take product decisions themselves based on their evidence. So we encourage our attendees, which we're so fortunate now to include people at our C-suite, to ask questions, to really dig into the why. And if we don't have an answer, that provides us with more fuel to be able to say, let me take that back and see if there's more here. Let's see if I can speak to more people and get your inquiries answered. That might lead us to better product decisions. So we had that meeting starting up. We started to get that broader audience in our organization. And then we needed to just be pervasive. So for me, that means that these insights need to be accessible to anyone in our organization. And it cannot just be people who are performing research, it cannot just be designers or researchers, right? It needs to be anyone. And a healthy design research culture should invite disagreements. It should invite conversation. People should be able to see evidence, should see your opinion and your insight, and be able to say, you know what, I'm seeing this differently based on my experience. That's what creates a healthy empirical culture in an organization. So this is why we start to look at Condens. We had other considerations in mind, such as Dovetail in the States. Um, One thing that we really admired about Condens was the magazine view, where we could invite many stakeholders that don't need to see all the nitty-gritty analysis work, but see all of the synthesis work in a really neat, uniform way and search across that things that we publish. That was a huge deal. And personally, as AI is starting to flourish, I think it's really powerful, the positioning that Condens has in terms of understanding where AI has its strengths in a summarization tool. But I do believe that the emergent grounded theory that UX research is, by saying instead of having that hypothesis at the top, saying, let's see if many people can observe a behavior and come to the same conclusion, that is the strength. And that is where UX researchers' value really is. And Condens is supporting that currently. So what does this look like in practice for us? I want to provide two examples. One example is going to demonstrate that more tactical UI-based immediate action. And the other one is going to demonstrate how it's being affected at a broad strategy for leadership. So at first, I want to reference a study by one of our designers, Preston Boyden, called Direct Connect. Of course, I can't go into all the details here, but what I can talk about is this is a UI-based study, right? This is very familiar with many individuals, similar to usability test. It's a bit of a concept test, usability test, but this is a part of continuously talking to our users or people who are similar personas. They had an assumed pain point that was stopping individuals from trusting this particular feature, and they needed to understand both behavior and sentiment around why that might be. It turns out that the insights that came from this were easily documentable in Condens. It was shared out that same week, and it changed their roadmap in terms of their opportunity they're pursuing. Um, it turns out that certain individuals only want to drive so far to go work somewhere. And this is an insight that came from this, easily documented. Now, let's talk about the macro scale. If that's the micro hyper focused action in the moment, we also want to talk about some of the larger work that we do. So, as any kind of product market fit work, um, we have done also new market research, as we always do, as any company does. And so this is, of course, a generative and problem-solving moment. So longer scale. This particular study that we did was the final of three. So this was primarily all of Q1, some of Q2, interviewing our C-suite stakeholders, able to understand their assumptions and their fears, and in particular, business impact decisions that if they didn't have evidence to take those decisions, would you be fearful or in doubt, or would you be defensible to do so? So that's what frames our studies in this model. This ended up being a very, very large study with lots and lots of insights. Very rewarding. I think it was at least 9.5 hours of interview transcript I've got to go through, and something like over 300 individual pieces of evidence that we had. Um, Overall, the impact of this kind of work when you're interviewing, of course, your C-suite stakeholders and delivering on the kinds of business impact fears that keep them up at night is that it earns you a seat at the table. You're there alongside the data teams that are there in order to provide those indirect observations through analytics, and as well, those revenue team members, which are always important in any organization that have that direct contact with the buyer. So imagine you have the people who are interacting day to day, getting that information through UX research. You're getting the current user understanding of behaviors through our data analytics and indirect observation. And then you get the buyer perspective, and you start to really triangulate an idea of what product market fit can look like. That would not be able to happen. That would not provoke conversation the way it did unless we were able to demonstrate that in a very flexible, accessible, pervasive, and persuasive tool like Condens. So how is Condens incorporated in our UXR practices now? Well, we've had investment and influence. We have grown our seat count quite a lot. That was an easy sell because of the impact it's had, and it would not have started with those grassroots activities, being able to invite people in, get them just a glimpse at the people we speak with, the people we learn from, such as those meet and greet meetings. We have since changed the presentation format a bit to always lead with the opportunities or action recommendations first, and then go into the insights afterwards. If you're going onto a call, you want to know the so what, right? Why? What can we do about this? And it's your responsibility, of course, as someone who performs user research, to come to the table saying, not just your observations are, but what is the impact that you believe you can have? Put yourself on the line so that you're able to take a product decision. People should be able to disagree with you. We have our directors, our VPs, our C-suites coming to these meetings, accessing these tools, sharing them with our board of directors in terms of clips from our users. Um, Now we have teams independently documenting this work. We do have a review process, but it's gotten so easy because you have people who are becoming experts in this work. They're organizing projects. It's not just one-off interviews that are being documented now. It's meta studies. It's going into Condens and saying, hey, let's look at all these studies from the past year or so and see if my new question that I have actually resonates, and collect these pieces so that it's already starting to pay for yourself. If you don't have to actually always go after new users, you can go back into your previous work and see the through line and provide your claim based on that evidence. And it's awesome also just to see people who are not the traditional designer, researcher, seeing PMs, engineers actually going out there and reading and actually producing this kind of work too. That's just a huge excitement. I think one of my favorite things over the past year and a half of this work has been hearing our C-suite individuals, our leadership, coming to the table and saying, I have an assumption about this thing, or I have an hypothesis here about this thing, because that's a real culture change, because it invites criticism and it invites vulnerability, and it allows everyone to have a voice, which is really, really powerful. So this transformation happened over basically a year, and we're about a year and I guess 8 months almost now into today, and it's only going faster. And so I'm really excited to see how we grow in this work, because I think we're going closer to a 4 now on the Nielsen-Norman scale. We are structured. Every team is performing this research. It's having an effect up to our C-suite. It's helping guide strategy, and I really couldn't ask for more. And I'm excited as we aim for that 6. We want it to be fully user-driven. So let's hope. Um, at this time, I think that we can have a mock analysis synth that I promised Phyllis. That sound all right with you?
Sounds great to me.
All right, I'm gonna stop my share momentarily to get this set up. Excellent. Yeah, I'll be sharing my screen once again. So of course, um, I would love to have shown you some of those big nitty-gritty reports, but that is IP, as any organization would have. And so one of our designers was so gracious to lend their time, Chelsea Parkinson, to record a brief call with me, tell me about her weekend she had with her daughter in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And so, as you can see here, I have uploaded already this clip that we have. It's really important for us to ensure that we have clean metadata the best we can. We're not the cleanest, no one ever is, but we're always working to be better. So our participant is Chelsea. That's me, Collin. It was a remote setting. One of the cool features that I do think is appropriate for AI in this setting was released this past year in Condens. It's bookmarks, and so we have these nice little anchor points that was developed from our conversation that just automatically generates. If you want, you can click to it and it'll scroll to that section, which I think is nice. And as I scroll down, as Phyllis introduced early in the conversation, you can start to tag your evidence. Something that I'm doing here is I'm not using our typical structure for tagging, because if I were to do that, then I would be creating data points that are not actually things that we want to keep in our repository. That's a way of saying that I love the universal tag as well as project specific tags. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about these tags. For here, I made these, as you can see, um, for this project alone so that it doesn't dilute our universal tagging. Our universal tagging allows us to go back into it and search across all time historically. And we're able to weave through different evidence to understand where the story goes. Conversations we've had in our past, that's especially powerful, as I mentioned, for meta studies that we do. But basically, Chelsea is speaker one here. Forgive me, I did not edit the speaker yet. I can do that for all instances. Well, let's see here. Replace all occurrences for Chelsea. There she is. She's talking about her daughter who's 2.5. It's really sweet. Basically, they were going to libraries, and in the area, there are 16 of them. They want to encourage people to go, even if you have a young reader who's not quite there to check out books yet, such as a 2.5-year-old. And they had devised a program where in the summertime, they had these little caterpillars called Wallace. Super cute things. We go down here to some other evidence. Here is this little caterpillar. And if you spot it in one of the libraries, you get a sticker to put on this cute little map. Now, that's a good way to engage people, right? And so I started to highlight a couple of things here that I think are important. Context setting. Here we have this activity of actually going to do a scavenger hunt at the library to find it. Something that I do like, for example, here is if I have like a few things, I can also do this nice little summary. I find personally that this AI feature works best when something is not too long that you're highlighting or not too short, because either way, you're either going to get too specific, lose context, or generalize too much text and lose context. I find it personally just right when it's like a medium, squishy amount. And then I usually come in here and I'll edit this a little bit. But to me, that's a useful tool. And then as we have this work, this is a templature that we have developed at Shiftkey that mirrors the expectation of that continuous discovery habits. This artifact type is called a snapshot. And so we have, of course, our metadata at the top. We try to have a memorable quote, something that will catch your attention as a reader. We have quick facts, and this can be like anything about the individual. Nowadays, in tandem with our data team partners, we actually are able to pull indirect observation data and understand how many years have they been working in the field, what's their recency of what kind of places they work at, information like that that helps situate our understanding and gives us a fuller picture and more compassion for this person that we're speaking with. And then we have our insights section, which is where we culminate evidence. Let's suggest here, maybe I do want to hit on the fact that there is this caterpillar scavenger hunt here. And let's say I want to pair that because I think that this evidence is compounding together to give a broader picture of an insight. Let's say that we talk about how these libraries that these caterpillars can be found at, these little stuffed caterpillars, are within a certain geographic area. And I might give it a title. Maybe it's caterpillar scavenger hunt. And then I'd want to actually come up here and provide my opinion. How am I inferring the value of this evidence based on the context of the objective that we've set out in terms of performing this research? I'm talking to this individual for a reason. And how does this fit into those objectives? That should inform the way in which the insight is shaped. And then afterwards, I should mirror those insights with action steps, as we call them opportunities. They could also be called recommendations. Depends on what kind of format. Typically, for performing a usability style test or evaluative test, we frame that as recommendations and as next steps, more concrete. If it's more generative work, upflow in the research process, we consider them opportunities. And finally, we like to have an image, a diagram of key moment, something that if only at a glance, if you were on one of those meet and greets for only a minute or so and you saw this image, it could summarize the crux of the conversation or the study that you had, and it would stick in that stakeholder's mind so that they can go back in there, or they can, we use Slack, they can message you on Slack and say, hey, what was that thing? It seems like it might be related to what I'm doing today. So let's look at a final version of what this could look like through the magic of time lapse. I put this together the other day. So this is the same snapshot again, but a finished version of it. So let's say it happened on the 5th. Here I am, the participant role, a mother, which is not one of our actual participant roles typically. Initial interview, and I'm omitting some of the other metadata that does not apply. A quote here, name of the caterpillar in this is Wallace, but her daughter calls him Wampus. And that's important. We have some quick facts, and then you start to see the insight structure here. So we like to make it easily searchable when it's in the magazine repository view. So we try to have an H2 as the summary for an insight. So if you want to just scroll down and click on an anchor point to go to this insight, you can. We actually have the content of our opinion based on the context, usually in a call-out box. And then we have our evidence that backs up our claim below. So you can see it directly correlated. One of the individuals at our company once called it showing the receipts. And I thought that was just one of the most charming way of talking about pairing evidence to your claim. I think it's fun that we can go down here. Let's talk about the relative geographic learning opportunity, and then we can go in to the actual clip, and we can play it. And here I'll let Kelsey speak briefly to what I think is a nice emotive sentiment.
Like, I'm semi-embarrassed to be like, I've driven 20 minutes one direction to find Wampus for my 2-year-old, but she loves it, so it's worth it.
I think that's worth sharing. I think it's really nice. This person may sound like they're being bashful about it, but you can hear through that work that she's actually really proud that she would do that for her daughter. And that's the kind of thing that you cannot get unless you're sharing those clips out to your organization. When we have real users on real calls, people can hear that emotive sentiment. And if they want to know more, they can go back in the transcript and dig into it. One last thing to call out here. As I mentioned, we have opportunities here. And so at that point, we have, as it corresponds, you can see 3 big opportunities as it corresponds to the 3 pieces of insights here. Sometimes there's more, of course, if you're very inspired. And then we have a diagram of a key moment in which your daughter found the caterpillar. So you'd be able to understand what's going on there.